I grew up in Collierville for a time too, so I haven't actually been back to the area. I've been south and north of here plenty, but I haven't actually gotten back to the city down here. So it's cool, man. First time I played in Memphis, yeah. I think Chris Broswell, he runs stuff over at I think it's River City Records. He's coming out too, so I'm meeting some folks at the event that I've been trying to meet for a while now. But yeah, no, I'm stoked for tonight. It's my first like actual show. I'm honestly real stoked to it be kind of in conversation and sort of doing some playing, but also doing some, hopefully not pontificating, but hopefully some like good dialogue getting there too, man. So y'all seem very conversational. I don't think we're gonna have any trouble. It's pretty cool. I mean, in terms of like my own love of music, Memphis is pretty hollow ground. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I listen to has come through here, mentions here. I'm glad to scrape a little gold off the nugget, you know what I mean? Yeah. I was always telling myself, people kept ginning me up about what a first record would be, and they almost got me kind of intimidated about it. But when you're actually listening to it, it's actually really easy. And yeah, I think what's really cool is I just keep telling myself, it's like, and maybe this ain't true neither, but is this something that's going to stand in like the collective consciousness of America for the next 400 years? Like, I don't know, but is it something that I can get behind 150%? Yeah, it is, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm stoked on it, man. Looks beautiful, sounds beautiful. Can't wait to hear it over at the Easy Eye Studios too, man. Mainly during the pandemic, I wasn't doing nothing. But yeah, I was busking a bit. I switched over to performing at venues. When I was up in New York, I kept hearing about this place called the Jalopy Theater School of Music. You ever heard of them? They're kind of like one of the few sort of folk music listening rooms that's still established. It's very much in that New York folk legacy of music when it comes to like Moses Ash or David Van Ronk or any of them cats, especially in their community. There's a really strong community of musicians up there. And I just kept hearing about this place called Jalopy. So I eventually reached out to them, and I started playing into that little folk scene before the pandemic really hit. It was definitely a crash course. I originally wanted to be a poet. I say this whenever I can. I wanted to write poetry for a living. I originally went up to New York because I was chasing poetry. But what wound up happening was like everybody was working full time. There weren't no hangs, you know what I mean? And so what I realized busking is like, at least for myself, like this is what a poet needs to be doing. Like once I got that first $30, on the road, on the street, after a day, it was just like the first hard cash you kind of felt from doing your own thing, honestly, I didn't really think about making a record for a long time until Dan and Alan had me out and we just kind of powwowed. It just didn't seem, especially with the kind of music I like playing, old country blues and pre-war. And I look at this as kind of like my take on where I was at this particular time in my life a year ago when it comes to my love of that particular music. But there's not a big pool of folks who were willing to take a gamble on it, especially willing to kind of, put their own necks on the line a little bit like Easy Eye has for the kind of sound I'm making. And it just kind of reminds me, that playing particularly the old country blues is like the punkest and the coolest you can actually be doing right now, kind of. So, yeah. I didn't really start thinking about it until about, beginning of last year. It just didn't seem like a reality to me, just releasing hot takes, stuff like that. I never really thought I'd be able to make some bread and butter off it, But yeah, once it got started, it really started rolling. I kind of had the idea for Yellow Peril. In terms of it being kind of like a thing that holds, I don't think the title or the song is a particular spoke that holds the whole piece together. A lot of the blues and a lot of the songs is kind of the traditional sort of yearnings and things like that. But I definitely look at Yellow Peril as like something that's got a little more, it hits a little closer to home in my identity, I guess. And it's like bringing it to people who don't necessarily know what it is or understand maybe my perspective and bringing it to them it's on a record, you know what I mean? Like, how can you not get behind that? So, yeah. A lot of people pointed out, like, Yellow Peril's like very heavily based on Boll Weevil Blues by Charlie Patton. My 75, 71 is like it's not a complete rip of Cassie Jones by Ferry Lewis and Ramble No More. That's a Tommy McLennan inspired piece, you know. Being able to play these songs that kind of got the inspiration, maybe not playing them as good as I still want to, but it's really cool potentially being like a initial introduction for cats who don't know none of these people is, and getting them turned on to the originals, you know. That's been a blessing. That's been really cool. I'm not relegated to the R.L. Crumb kind of back corners of the niche, you know, and not knocking R.L. Crumb backwaters of the niche at all, but it's like, yeah, it's nice to be able to, given a platform, been given the opportunity to get my songs out there and, yeah, in a bigger way, I guess, than just like releasing YouTube videos or doing Blind Boy Forward covers on YouTube, you know. So, like, since I've been performing more, a good friend of mine, Dre, told me, and I think this is very apt, especially when it comes to music, is like 15% of the stuff is work, but 85% of it's the hang. And it's like Dan and Alan are good at hanging. So many different mics. I mean, must have been a dozen different mics set up in the outcroppings of the house, like a bottle mic next to my foot, a mic like through the stairwell, a mic, you know, in another room connected to a different amp, picking up all of the ambiance, nice ribbon mic kind of right next close to me, just capturing all these different kind of angles of the sound. I didn't really understand what like sound engineers and producers like really are doing on the back end, but watching Alan like literally in the act of cutting and splicing at this like lightning speed, it was kind of like watching I don't want to go to a cliche, but you know, it was like watching a master Italian painter do what they were doing. Final day of writing, I came into the studio and I was a little nervous. I remember because I was calling Dan. I was sending him these like, you know, when you get like a text message that's longer than a tweet, you're just like, oh no. I was sending like those kind of twit longers. And I remember he just called me. He was like, you're nervous, man. He's like, I could tell you're nervous. He's like, don't be nervous. You know, just kind of being like a Zen master about it. But when I got over to the studio, he was, we were just kind of like writing some pieces, kind of finishing up what we were going to do over the weekend. But Johnny and Caleb and Mickey, they were all doing kind of, and Tyler, they were all doing, they were like moving a bunch of stuff around, taking inventory, moving it out. And I asked them where they were going, and Dan told me he'd tell me tomorrow. So he just texted me his address in the morning. I went over there. Everything was basically set up over at his house. The dog was running around. Early his son was going. It kind of was like a Lomaxian daydream, you know what I mean? Or like a field recorder's daydream. It was very organic and at the same time very, very like jerry-rigged, but also like very professional, I guess, you know? Like it was kind of things on Yellow Peril. Dan's playing bass with me. He's playing upright bass while Pat McLaughlin's doing some like kind of guitar flails. And it was so funny because Dan was actually playing with Hank Williams Jr. that night, and he was playing the bass so hard his thumb started, or like his fingers started smarting really bad, and he got some blisters on his fingers. But I think it's interesting still because, I mean, I'm just so kind of deep in the pre-war sound. My understanding and my appreciation of things like copyright and ownership and things like that are really kind of rudimentary insofar as, like, I never really thought about having a record, just like the old fellas back in the day, never really thought about the 78s they cut. You know, I had the same kind of mentality about my own records and just, you know, I mentioned Muddy Waters and taking that photo of his first record, really understanding it's just like, oh, this is kind of like a, you know, this is a testament to who I is right now. And it's like, it's in my hand, it's in this texture. It's been a really interesting transition, I guess. Yeah, it's come on hard and fast, and yeah, I still don't know what to think of it, man. So I once talked to this 78 collector, I can't remember his name, out of England, but he was a big record collector. Maybe some of the 78 collectors actually know who he is. They probably do. But I met him over in Connecticut during a performance at Spring Hill Arts Gathering, and he was telling about inviting John Lee Hooker over to like listen to records. I mean, I guess he had gotten that big to a point to where John Lee Hooker would come to his house, and he played some of John Lee Hooker's records back for him. And he said that John Lee just was like listening very intently to what was happening. He asked him, he's like, what are you listening to? And John Lee told him, he's like, I haven't heard these cuts since the day I laid them down. He's like, these records are like 20, 30 years old. And he's just like, I'm trying to figure out where I was at that time. And I definitely look at that in terms of like where I'm at as a musician. I play, you know, I was saying 75, 71 is like a lot like Ferry Lewis. Now I play it a lot more like Ferry Lewis. I sang it a little bit more like Ferry Lewis. It's interesting how songs themselves can change as well. You know, you can be like Kings of Leon and be able to do like the record live, right? But it's also like, what's the point of doing the live if you just got the record then, you know? So it's like, I like that my sound's kind of constantly developing. And I think what's curious too is like, I play certain things on the record where it's like, I can't even though I think I'm more technically savvy, it's like, I don't know what I'm doing no more. You know what I mean? Something that's really kind of always dawning on me is what a collaborative effort all music is. And when it comes to the laying of the record, to the performance aspect of it, to the people who make that performance possible, to people who make that recorded stuff possible. So being able to look behind the screen a little bit, like Brandon said, and just being able to like perceive all the things that are going on. It's like taking those 500 copies of that marble print and like laying it down for me, you know? It's just really cool. You know, again, like with Mike and the whole Concord team and the rest of Easy Eye and even my own management and things like that. I'm just truly grateful.